it's Penny here, and today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in May. So I read 9 books in May. And as usual, I'm going to do this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books, I battle them against each other until we come up with the champion of the month. So this month I've got some middle grade books. Most of those were fantasy, and I do also have some adult fantasy. I've got some very strange, fantastical sci-fi type books, as well as a couple of contemporaries. So I'll leave timestamps down below if you want to jump to a particular section, but let's get into talking about all the books. So firstly, for our round 1 preliminary round, we've got Bridge of Souls by Victoria Schwab up against A Tangle of Spells by Michelle Harrison. So A Bridge of Souls is the 3rd book in the Cassidy Blake series, which is all about this girl who can see ghosts. Now, as well, her parents are paranormal investigators and they are traveling the world filming this documentary, and she is going along with them. So she's visiting all these different cities which have a lot of ghosts. And of course, her parents don't realize that she can see ghosts, and they also don't realize that, in fact, her best friend is traveling with them and he is a ghost. In this 3rd book, they visit New Orleans, and actually Cassidy has this mysterious paranormal creature coming after her. So it did get quite scary in some bits, although I didn't feel like it investigated the paranormal mysteries of New Orleans as specifically as the ones in Edinburgh and France did, because the main paranormal aspect was kind of this thing that Cassidy had been bringing with her from beyond the veil. As well, I was a little bit disappointed with the way that this particular book de-escalated this bigger mystery that's going on with Cassidy's ghost friend. I was really hoping that that would be taken to the next level, but instead it's kind of stepped back a little bit. I still expect that there are going to be future books in this series. I feel like I'm assuming that, but that's my assumption, and that it will be re-escalated at some point. I do think the strength of this particular book was there was very strong themes of friendship. So both Cassidy and her ghost friend, as well as a friend that she made in a previous book in a previous city, also gets involved. And I do think it was actually quite scary in some bits. So while I'm not sure that it exactly blew me away, for a paranormal middle grade, I think it's a lot of fun. Then we had A Tangle of Spells by Michelle Harrison. This is the 3rd and I believe the final book in a series, which I don't know what the series is called. The 1st book was A Pinch of Magic. I'll never remember the name of the 2nd book. And then we've got A Tangle of Spells. So in this series, we have these 3 sisters who all have these different magical artifacts that they have inherited. And in this book, they are moving to a new home in this new village. And at first, they're very excited. They think everything's going to be amazing until they see the house, and it seems very dark and mysterious. And very quickly, you find out that something is not right in this town that they've moved to, and the story gets very witchy. I really liked the witchy part of things, and like the previous books in the series, it also has quite a lot of like fun rhymes and different ways that the magic is working. I think if there was anything I would criticize about this book, I would say I didn't particularly like the way that the adults were kind of turned against the children, or at least made unreliable to the children. And there's also like themes of alcoholism and like teen objectification that I didn't feel like I liked the way that it was dealt with, but it wasn't especially bad. I'm probably just being picky. And for a witchy middle grade book, it was just a lot of fun. So both of these books, they're both middle grade. I'm not the target market, so while I just enjoyed them and thought they were okay, I don't know that I would count them as favorites. I don't even know that I would really say they're the best middle grades that I have read, but they were fun. And I can definitely see middle grade type people enjoying them. So which one was my favorite? I think probably the one I liked most was A Tangle of Spells, just because I think the way the witches were done was really interesting and creative, whereas I just feel like there was something missing in A Bridge of Souls, although I can't quite articulate what it was. So I'm going to put A Tangle of Spells through to the next round. And in this next round, I'm going to put A Tangle of Spells up against Karin's Roller Skates by Katy Farina. So Karin's Roller Skates is actually a graphic novel comic adaptation of an original book that was published back in the 80s as part of the Babysitter's Club Little Sister series. So down at the bottom of my bookshelf here, I have like 100 Babysitter's Club books, maybe 200. I forget, I counted them once. romance a lot. Babysitter's Club books were my favorite books as a kid. The Babysitter's Club Little Sister ones were kind of like a spin-off series aimed at a slightly younger demographic, and I read a few of them when I was younger, but not too many, just because I was busy trying to get through all the Babysitter's Club books. However, this series is still very nostalgic to me, and so it was very exciting for me to pick up this graphic novel adaptation. And once I started reading it, I did realize that this is one where I read the original. And as soon as Karin started going out on her roller skates, I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna break her wrist, which she did. Karin is a young girl who likes to make up a lot of stories, and it often gets her into trouble. And in this particular book, it was no different. I do think the art is really cute, and I think the lessons that Karin learns in the book, again, would be really good for middle grade type people that this is targeted at. And just for the nostalgia, I think if you read the Babysitter's Club or the Babysitter's Club Little Sister books when you were younger, that you will definitely enjoy reading this version of it. It kind of modernizes the story, but it still keeps true to the original at the same time. It is kind of hard to put this up against A Tangle of Spells because it's just a very short comic graphic novel up against like a full book that actually had quite a detailed plot in it. And I think just for the pure witchiness of A Tangle of Spells, I'll probably put that through. There is a witch in the Babysitter's Club Little Sister books, or at least Karin believes their next door neighbor is a witch. But I want a real witch, so I'm gonna go with A Tangle of Spells. Okay, then our next battle, we have Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence up against Grave Peril by Jim Butcher. Both of these are sequels, so Grey Sister is the second book in the Book of the Ancestors series. I read Red Sister in the previous month, I think, and I found my experience to be pretty similar to the first book in that it started out okay, and then we got a large part of this assassin school that the main character is going to, and for the most part the assassin school at this convent, I find it quite boring. However, the magic system is really amazing. There's people who can kind of slow down time around them so that it looks like they're moving really fast from an outside perspective. We've got people just with brute strength. We've got all these different mystics who can use other kinds of magic, and Nonna is able to use quite a few of these different magics. And as well, all of this is set within this quite interesting world. But a significant part of the book doesn't really explore the parts that I'm interested in. It's just kind of the stuff that I find kind of boring. I think people who really like action-based books and aren't too worried about whether the action has a definite plot that it's following, I think people who like that might still like this. In fact, a lot of people do like this series, so obviously those people have slightly different priorities from me as to what they like. And I did really like this, and right at the end, things got very exciting and I got very engaged, and when it ended, I was like, oh my goodness, I need to go straight into the next book, which just makes it really hard when I was so bored in sections, but also right at the end, it really pulled me in. So how do I feel about this book? Conflicted. I think the one thing that I liked particularly about this middle book in the series is that we do get a little bit of the teachers' perspectives, or like the nuns. Are they nuns? I guess they're nuns. The sisters in the church, we get some of their perspectives, and I liked actually getting that adult perspective. And through that we got a lot more of the politics of what was going on, which I really enjoyed. And to be honest, I started the third book and I'm a bit disappointed we didn't get more of that in the third book. Although I guess you could argue in the third book that Nonna herself, the main character, is getting older, so she's almost an adult perspective. But not really, and also I'm not talking about the third book now, so let's put that aside for later. The other book in this battle is Grave Peril, which I think is the third book in the Harry Dresden files. So being the third book, I have talked about this series before. We've got Harry Dresden. He is a wizard and he does paranormal investigations. He works with the police and he also just helps other people out who are having paranormal problems. But he does have some difficulties with the White Council, which are like the Wizarding Council. He also kind of has this real like obsession with the fact that he needs to protect other people. And as well, the thing that frustrates me the most about this series is Harry Dresden just is always thinking about women, and he describes them all as beautiful and amazing, and he'll be in a life and death situation and he'll be noticing sexual things about a woman, and I get very annoyed with it. And it's especially frustrating because I do think there are some really interesting things about the magic, and I think the mysteries that we're investigating are pretty interesting, but I find it really hard to focus on that part of the story because I'm so frustrated by Harry Dresden and the things that he's thinking when he should not be focusing on those things. And honestly, if he is going to think them, I don't need to know them. As well, I think I just get frustrated with books where every single woman character is beautiful and amazing, because I don't feel like all women should have to be beautiful and amazing, and I don't feel it's realistic to say that we are. But anyway, putting that aside, this particular book in the series had ghost magic and dream magic, which was really cool, and I only wish I could have paid more attention to that rather than being distracted by Harry's stupid thoughts. I think if that kind of writing doesn't bother you, you'll probably really love this series. I have been told that it gets better. I'm not confident that I believe that it gets better, but I'm going to keep reading the series for a little while to see. There are 17 books in the series, so I guess we'll see how far I get through before I get too sick of it. But again, I'm listening to these as audiobooks, so it's okay. I can read it while I'm commuting and like groan to myself in my car whenever he thinks something stupid. So putting these two books up against each other, I do think that what's going on in Grey Sister, the plot is more complex, the magic system is cooler, the characters are not perfectly written, but they are very interesting, and you do come to care about them, or at least I have. So I think overall, I definitely think Grey Sister is a better book, and so I'll be putting that through to the next round. Then for our next battle, we've got Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe by Toshikazu Kawaguchi up against Amatka by Karin Tidbeck. So Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe is the sequel to Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This is a very strange story. It's about this cafe where if you sit in a particular seat, which you can only sit at during certain times, and you drink coffee in that seat and think about where you want to go back in time, you can go back in time. However, you can't leave your seat, and you can only stay back in time until the coffee gets cold. Also, you know when you go back in time that you won't be able to change anything in the past. Despite all of those weird rules for this time travel, both the original book and the sequel write very emotional stories about why people might want to go back in time. Now, it's worth noting a lot of those reasons have to do with people dying. I guess also people making life choices in the past that they regret. This one definitely trigger warnings for death of loved ones and suicide. It's definitely very emotional, and I really loved the stories in both the original and this one. I do think it's very philosophical about life, this latest one, and I'm not sure I agreed with everything it said, but still it was really interesting ideas, and just the characters are all lovely, and the people at the cafe are kind of part of the story, and their story almost goes longer than the individual stories. So it's beautifully written, very strange, but I really loved it. Then the other book in this battle is Amatka. This is like a sci-fi dystopian where these people live in these colonies and they don't really know where the colonies came from, but everything in these colonies has to be named either by verbally saying its name or by keeping labels on it, and if it isn't named often enough, it will revert to this gloopy substance, which seems to be quite dangerous. And our main character is this hygiene product researcher. So she's going from the main colony to this colony that's kind of out in this very cold area where things are a bit different, and she's trying to find out whether any of their hygiene products will be suitable for these people out in this other colony. There's also these committees that can basically make decisions and everyone has to follow them, and if something happens that they don't want people to know about, they will just say like, we're looking forward, and people can't talk about what happened anymore. There's definitely a lot of stuff being covered up, and there's this mystery throughout trying to figure out what's going on. The ending is super weird, and I think if it had been anything different, it would have been very disappointing. As it was though, I was a little bit disappointed just because the way that things pan out, our main character kind of becomes a bit separated from the weirdness at the end and they're more of an observer. And I personally would have liked to get more inside knowledge about all the weirdness that was going on. But still, the weirdness at the end was very satisfying. As well, just throughout the story, there were themes about depression and dealing with chronic illnesses and just like an investigation of what it's like to deal with change, or how some people can kind of push for change and lead change and how important that is as well. I just thought the way the themes were investigated was really beautiful. There's some really wonderful relationships going on, some really heartbreaking moments, and it turned out that I really loved the story. So it's actually difficult because putting these two against each other, of all the stories I read this month, these are the two books which made me feel the most emotional and the ones that I felt the most connected to. Still, I would say that the themes and the mystery and the plot in Amatka were stronger, and so I'm going to put Amatka through to the next round. Then lastly, we've got our two contemporaries. So we've got Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata up against Cousins by Patricia Grace. So Convenience Store Woman, this is a Japanese translated work, and I had heard that it was this amazing social commentary. We have this woman who's like 40 years old and she's always worked in a convenience store, and her friends don't really understand why she isn't following the typical path in life where you have your career and your family and all those things. And I was really interested in that because I think that a lot of people follow that path without really understanding that you don't have to, and that there are plenty of other options out there for your life. Unfortunately, I was a bit disappointed because the main character doesn't really choose to do this because they want to do something different. They just don't really understand the societal expectations that are on them, and they just really enjoy working at the convenience store, which is cool. But I would have liked her to make that choice to work at the convenience store because she loved it, rather than just working at the convenience store because she didn't really understand her other options and didn't really have the emotional competence to take on any of the other options. But still, there were some parts where there were some interesting social commentary when she was talking to her friends, and I did like that. But then, halfway through the book, she has this guy that she kind of becomes involved in, and he just a complete loser, and he was also trying to say all these things about how you shouldn't just follow society's way of doing things and how society is so judgmental about people who want to do things differently. And everything he said was just complete bullshit. He was just a loser who didn't want to do anything because he was lazy. And I hated him, and I didn't enjoy reading about any of that. And so overall, this was actually a pretty short book, and the parts that I actually liked were even smaller. I did enjoy the parts where she was working in the convenience store, and perhaps some of the parts where she was talking with her friends, but a lot of the rest of it kind of disappointed me. Then the next book in this battle is Cousins by Patricia Grace. So this is a New Zealand book written by a Maori author, and it's about these three cousins who are separated when they're younger, but their stories kind of intertwine throughout their childhood and their adulthood. I actually thought going into this, because there's just been a movie released and the trailer made out like they had this amazing bond when they were children, but then they were separated and as adults they came back together. In the book, it's not really like that though. They barely know each other as children, even though their stories do intertwine somewhat. And then when they come back together as adults, it's more just kind of something that happens accidentally rather than it being something planned or something that any of them were trying to make happen. But regardless, despite the fact that it didn't really meet my expectations, I did enjoy it. It was very strange in some parts. Like there's one section which is written from the perspective of the unborn brother of one of these cousins. And I think a few other sections were also written from interesting and creative perspectives. Like just one part was one of the cousins writing letters to her mother. So you also kind of get her mother's perspective mixed in there. And I thought it was a really interesting book in the way that it looks at Maori culture, but it kind of looks at it from the perspective of some parts of the culture are really important, but other parts are maybe not always as great. And I guess it's investigating what it's like to be connected to your family in the way that Maori people kind of believe that they're connected to their ancestors. There are also definitely parts of the story that made me feel quite emotional, especially at the end where it almost got a little bit fantastical, but I guess that is debatable depending on what you believe reality is. Anyway, I did enjoy this, and I think if I'm putting it up against Convenience Store Woman, which really disappointed me, I'm definitely going to put Cousins through to the next round. Okay, so now we're up to the semi-finals, and we're going to put A Tangle of Spells by Michelle Harrison up against Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence. It's probably not really fair to put a middle grade up against an adult book, and I just have to say the magic system in both was pretty interesting actually, but the magic system in Grey Sister is just like my dream magic system in some ways. And there was a lot more complexity going on, and when we got some of the politics, that was really interesting. The characters were definitely a lot more developed. Is that true? Maybe not entirely, but I guess I like things to be a little bit darker. Grey Sister was a little bit darker, so I'm going to put Grey Sister through to the next round. Then we've got Amatka by Karin Tidbeck up against Cousins by Patricia Grace. Both of these books I did feel very emotional about, and I did like both of them. However, personally, the themes that were explored in Amatka were ones that just hit me much harder, and also it was much stranger, which I really liked. Although again, they were both strange, but I definitely loved Amatka much more. I think if you like strange science fiction dystopian things which look at the way that our perspective of the world influences reality, then I think that you will really like Amatka. And so I'm definitely going to put Amatka through to the next round. And that next round is going to be the finals. So we've got Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence up against Amatka by Karin Tidbeck. I actually never thought that Grey Sister would be in the finals, so that's a surprise, but it also probably gives you a hint that Amatka is going to be the champion of the month. I really enjoyed the reading experience. Even though I was a little bit disappointed in the ending, the overall journey totally made it worth it. Which is interesting because Grey Sister is almost the opposite. Grey Sister, I really enjoyed the ending, but the journey didn't entirely feel worth it. Which just goes to show maybe the ending of a book isn't everything. You need the whole book to be good. Anyway, I loved Amatka, and if you pick it up, I hope that you will too. Do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about today, because I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.